Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tabor Talk. I'm your host, Michael Tabor. So, getting right into this, I am going to do another edition on the Bible, another book on the Bible. I've already talked about the book of Job at length. What I did for that episode, it was like an hour and 20 minutes. I actually played half of the podcast of the Very Bad Wizards. They broke it down, the book of Job. I played it all and I commented in between. I paused and whatever. The reason I did that is because, well, quite frankly, they're the best. The Very Bad Wizards, David Pizarro and Tamler Summers. Tamler's a philosopher, and Dave Pizarro teaches here at Cornell. He's a social psychologist, and I just thought that their take on this, the way they broke it down, was awesome. And what makes it so good is the entertainment value. I mean, there's a lot there. There's information. It's a sort of I don't know if you would call it a scholarly breakdown, but these are high level guys, and they're funny too, and they're comedians. They're not making light of the book. Don't get me wrong, but they're regular guys. They're breaking down the Bible in plain talk. It's not dry and boring. There's nothing more repulsive than a fucking evangelist, a theologian who's so fucking boring. And like, they're just parroting. No wonder Christianity is in the fucking toilet. They're fucking boring, dude. Like, get away from the podium. Anyway, so I'm going to come back here. I'm going to do another one of these. I'm going to do another wisdom book. All right, so I've done the book of Job. It's on my channel. And now I'm going to do Ecclesiastes. And again, I'm going to play the Very Bad Wizards. They broke this down. The podcast is like a couple of months old. I'll embed it in my comments section. I'll also put some other stuff on Ecclesiastes. But wow, this is simply the best. I mean, when I heard this, I've listened to this twice already, and you'll see. It's a game changer. Okay, I'll be right back with Ecclesiastes. Hello, everyone, and getting right into this. So, I'm going to have a little prelude here. I'm going to play a song by Black Sabbath, not to be sacrilege or blasphemous here, but there's a song right after Ozzy left Sabbath. I think this was 83, 84, and Ronnie James Dio did a couple of albums with Black Sabbath, and there was an album they put out, Heaven and Hell, and this is the song. So since I'm going to be talking about the Bible and Ecclesiastes, I think it's sort of apropos to lead in with this, and then I'll get right into the Very Bad Wizard podcast and break it down and discuss it. Get ready for a great show. Ready? What a great song this is. I feel like I'm 19 again. I'm being silly. What a great voice, right? With the lyrics too, right? I'm 56 years old, people, and I'm still headbanging. So. This song would probably be better for when I do the book of Revelation. Revelation is fucking kick-ass. Ecclesiastes. This is a great song. I haven't heard this in a while. The lyrics right here. Great podcast coming. Ecclesiastes. I'm so silly, right? I'll play a little bit more of this and I'll get right into it. I'll fade out. I hate the bridge here. Why do musicians do that? The bridge. But it gets great. When it comes back, it fucking really rocks and kicks ass. Listen, I haven't heard this in a while, so. I'm 56, people. Arrested Development or what? This sounds good. I used to love this song. Here's a little lead break by Tony Iommi. It's going to start to really rock here. Check it out. Right now. Stop acting silly, Mike. All right. Rockstar. It's heaven and hell. Okay. Oh, it just got louder. He was great, Ronnie James Dio. And what charisma. He died about 6 years ago. Lead singer for Rainbow started, and he had his own thing, Dio. You know, heavy metal and all that, but okay. So here we go. I'm going to start with the Very Bad Wizards. One of the greatest podcasts ever. Really. The way they did on Ecclesiastes. Listen. Just simply the best. Here we go. The Very Bad Wizards. Tamler Summers and David Pizarro. And I'll be commenting.
So, Ecclesiastes. Dave, how did you get introduced to this? Probably in a different way than I did.
In a very different way. You know, as many of our longtime listeners know, I was raised in a very religious household. Specifically, I was raised Seventh-day Adventist. Seventh-day Adventists, they're my people. I love them. One of the things that they very much like to do is read the Bible. So as a kid, I was very encouraged to read the Bible. But, you know, if you're a kid and you're a nerd and
I was raised
told
Catholic,
to read something, you really read it. So I really read the Bible. In fact, one of my favorite pastimes was to find really fucked up texts in the Bible. So whenever somebody asked me to say a text for worship, for like Sabbath worship, I would pull out like really...
Like what?
Oh, man, like there's a verse in Ezekiel that talks about the it's a metaphor of Israel being God's woman, and he says that you left and you cheated on me. You went to seek lovers in Egypt who have genitals the size of donkeys and emissions the size of horses. It's great. It's like Ezekiel.
That's right in the Bible,
23.
right?
Genitals the size of donkeys, and what was it?
Emissions the size of horses.
Emissions.
Yeah, I might get getting it the wrong.
Let me
That's
just
the
pause
King
this for a
James
second.
version.
I mean, this stuff is in the Bible. They're not making this up. You know, the genitals the size of donkeys and the emissions, what is it? And you have, I used to know a guy who read the Bible, and I used to get into it a little bit with how bizarre and crazy the Bible is, especially the Old Testament. There's some weirdness, obviously, too, in the New Testament, and he didn't seem to think there was a problem with it. Like, that's a fucked up dude. You know, like you don't see a problem with, you know, God has his dick is as big as a donkey and the emissions of whatever. Do you have no problem with that? Or how about the, you know, bald, who was the prophet? What's the story in the forest? And the kids, a bunch of kids, like 42 kids, something like that, are making fun of this prophet, and God sets bears on these kids for teasing the bald guy, the bald prophet, mauled and ate them. In the Bible. Then there are a million other stories. Kid you not. Let's continue on with Ecclesiastes.
But Ecclesiastes early on, I remember just, you know, I don't remember at what point I realized how cool it was, but I think
It is a
that
cool
I really
book, man.
realized
It
when
is
I
the
was
best
in
book in the Bible.
college, in my existential sort of dabbling with the existential literature, and I realized that this book just was. I like to think that it was because I was being really deep, but I was probably being emo and fake deep at the time. But like I thought, man, this is really wisdom. This is. It seemed to me even back then like it was.
I'm gonna
was a
have my
deep
prayer now.
truth. It resonated.
And I think it does with a lot of people. I think this is it touches people from, you know, whatever, both really religious people, but also people who have strayed from it or who have abandoned it or rejected it. There is something deeply meaningful, beautiful about it that is that it just resonates.
What
in
you said
terms of
about right now, that beautiful part. Yes, I didn't say that, but it's beautiful.
Yes.
It is. There's and which is funny given how bleak the message it can be interpreted as unrelentingly bleak.
Yes.
But there is something beautiful and almost I don't know, like there's something comforting about it in a weird way.
Yeah.
Which
I get that.
may be why it's included in the Bible. We can speculate about that.
Let me pause
later.
this here.
I'm sure maybe.
I mean, it's beautiful in a sense. It is bleak if people who've read the Ecclesiastes and know about it. It's depressing. I mean, essentially, life is meaningless. We're all going to die, and what's it for? Like, they'll get into it, but the feeling like, yes, we understand this, and we know this. Because ultimately, as we all know, nothing matters. Like, if this is it, and if there is no afterlife or whatever, everything is meaningless. Like, everything. Eventually, this earth is going to be gone, right? This earth, everything that ever was, Beethoven, all that stuff, the ancient Greeks and the internet, gone, as if we never existed. So that's what they're talking about. Let me continue on. This button is really small, and I'm trying to be careful. You see, I downloaded this, and I'm trying to hit this.
Right. You know, in Hebrew school, we talked about it, but I have no memory.
I'm going to have my kratom now.
In this great books course that I team teach, it was put on the syllabus, and you know, a lot of the Bible stuff that we do, I always enter in with, you know, deep caution and wariness. And I had never heard of Ecclesiastes, and then I started reading it in preparation for talking about it with my students, and I was just blown away by it. I couldn't believe it. Like you said, it's like Camus, it's like Nagel the Absurd. It's like
exactly. But written, you know, fucking, you know, like 400 years before Christ or whatever.
Yeah. And it was just mind-boggling to me that this was in the Bible, and that was, in the Jewish tradition, you read every portion of the Bible on the same date, and you always read it on Sukkot, which is one of the major holidays, comes right after Yom Kippur. And, just the idea that that's like a celebration. That's a day of celebration, and this is what they read on that day is fascinating to me. And as a text, just even if you separate it from the fact that it's in the Bible as a text, I think it's really interesting. It can be interpreted in tons of different ways. It has a kind of a bleak message. It has sprinkled within it, and especially right at the end, a kind of pious message.
Right.
Got
and
my
then it
wallet
also
here.
has this kind of Epicureanism laced within it in terms of what we should do about the fact that we don't know anything, that everything is meaningless, futile, absurd, and there is a sense of enjoy the pleasures of life that are given to you. All of that is kind of, it's the way it's baked in. It's at times poetic. It's at times it's like third person narrative sometimes, first person narrative sometimes. It's just really interesting as a text.
Right.
So,
it lapses into poetry in the middle of the prose.
Yeah. Proverb, just all of a sudden, just some proverbs thrown in there. So I guess let's talk about the genre. So I guess it's part of what people call wisdom literature, and it's one of the books of wisdom in the Bible, along with Job.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Proverbs.
And sometimes Psalms, I guess, or some Psalms.
Yeah. Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
Proverbs, Psalms, Ecclesiastes,
this and Job are my favorite books.
Me too.
For a reason.
Me too.
And so I actually remember taking a class on the books of wisdom. Some of the analysis, despite being very God-centered education, the professor was good and gave us a lot of good analysis, like trains you how to read the Bible as text, right? He was a real scholar. And I wanted to mention that one of the reasons I get so much joy from reading some of these books is from the ambiguity that comes from the translations, right? So we talked briefly off before we recorded that there's all these different versions. You read different versions and it says really, really different things.
Including like the key word in this, which is vanity. In my translation, not your translation. So here's how it starts. The words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. In my translation, vanities of vanities, says the teacher. Vanities of vanity. All is vanity. And that just is a motif that repeats. This is vanity. That's vanity. Everything is vanity. Right. That's not your translation.
No. So mine... It says meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. And I think that's just
vanity,
understood to be the better translation. I mean, because the word vanity has come to mean other things.
It's come to mean something like a bad character trait.
Right, like pride overblown,
I'm taking notes, too.
No compersion.
I've heard this twice, but in case
a lack of compersion. It's come to mean that. No, but and I think the idea is that it's partly your fault, or there's some vice that you would have, and that's not what. So the actual literal word is hevel. It's a Hebrew word, and it is literally mere breath or mere vapor. So the idea is that it's everything is just breath. It's like hot air, kind of. It is
ephemeral. It's ephemeral.
It's ephemeral. That's one way of translate. You could even translate it that way. You could translate it as meaningless. You could translate it as futile, I think, absurd. But the idea is that whatever you think you're going to get out of the world, you're not going to get.
Right.
It's just another thing that is translated different ways. Although I think there's a little more consensus. Chasing the wind.
Yeah.
That's another recurring theme, that it's all that the things that you try to do, cultivating riches or knowledge, or it's just chasing the wind. but I did come across a translation that said shepherding the wind. Like you're actually
like herding cats.
Yeah,
I'm just going
but
through
it's
my
like
stuff
you're
here.
herding sheep, except it's wind, so there's no way you can herd it. Like I like that actually. I like that image of you're trying to herd something.
Oops. Did that pause? Let me go back here. Yeah.
Very Bad Wizards is a podcast.
Oh my God. All right.
My dad.
Let me try to go back.
There is something beautiful and almost, I don't know, like there's something comforting about it.
Okay.
But I have no memory.
I apologize for that. I didn't think that would
Caution
happen.
and wariness. And I had never heard of Ecclesiastes, and then I started.
Like 400 years before Christ or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is like the whole Athens philosophy like happens
That's
in
right.
that exact period of time, and so
Okay, I'm sort of picking up. I am picking up where I lost connection here. So I downloaded the Very Bad Wizard podcast, and I'm just playing this and pausing it when necessary. Okay, let me continue on. I'm not going to play the whole thing, and by the way, this can't be more than an hour. You can't do anything more than an hour on iMovie. I send this stuff to iMovie, edit it, and boom. Okay.
like Western philosophy is born and evolving during this period.
Right,
So,
and this is the philosophy. This is the bit of philosophy that exists in the Bible. Like it really does read like philosophy.
it really does.
That's right.
It's full of. It reads like philosophy, but I would say in some ways it reads more like Eastern philosophy, in that there's no real unity to the how it's being conveyed, what the message is, and there's a lot of contradictory passages. There's so many and I don't want to go deep into some of them, but the author will contradict. Will say one thing and then the next sentence say something that at least seems completely inconsistent with that.
And it's weird because I don't think until this round of reading it that I noticed how inconsistent it is, because I had never really read it as a I mean I had in college, I guess, but it just reading it reads sort of like a stream of consciousness. And it never bothered me that he seems to say very different things, because both of the things that he says seem true to me,
Yeah,
even if they're contradictory.
And I think that's really an important point, is that I think we have sides of us that are drawn to many of the things, even including some of the contradictory things that are in the text, and it is a great expression of that. That's part of the beauty of it, and the deep philosophical and artistic quality of it is that it expresses different sides of yourself that aren't necessarily harmonious.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So it doesn't, I don't think it matters who wrote it, and it probably matters little unless you're a scholar. If you just want to grok have the meaning, probably doesn't matter whether it was a king or not. But it does seem to me that this is a person who has lived a long life. And who's actually experienced these things. I don't know. It seems very experiential.
Yes, and like a long and successful life, at least by external measures of success.
Yep.
And it reads as an old person. And I think there's actually a lot
This
of
is deep.
text
Okay, here we
at the
go.
end that suggests
Get ready.
that this is an old person who has grown weary with the things that used to excite them, and doesn't want the young people to fail to appreciate some of the things that he can no longer appreciate.
And actually, like, I have to say that reading this as a young person, I think it actually helped me. Like, I think it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget all this advice. It's easy to forget that you should enjoy life more. But it did, I think, impart some wisdom that I think I'm better off having heard this.
I think you also maybe read it differently, like as a young religious kid and as a middle-aged atheist, and that's part of why it's indelible.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about it.
Let me just pause there for 1 second.
And it doesn't.
That's true with any book, right? So there are books when you read as a young person, books when you're in your 30s, books when you're middle-aged, books when you're old, and they mean different things. I had a friend who talked about when he was his early 20s, Jack Kerouac's On the Road. And it's like, I don't even know if I'd want to read that, and he's a man in his 60s. And, I do the same thing. There are books that I've read as a young, and I go back to them and it's like, whoa, like, what did I see in this book? Or, you know what I mean? So obviously On the Road is a young person's book. Same with Catcher in the Rye, So, okay, so let me continue here.
Coherent narrative, but it does have a kind of a frame. So it starts out as a narrator saying, here are the words of presumably Solomon, but it doesn't have to be. It could be someone in the line of David, someone who is a king in Jerusalem. It then goes into a first-person narrative. So the frame is third person, and then it goes into a first-person narrative, where it says, I, the teacher, when king over Israel and Jerusalem, applied my mind to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to human beings to be busy with. I saw that all deeds are done under the sun, and see all is vanity, meaningless, and chasing after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight. What is lacking cannot be counted. So already it just starts out as like, wait, God has has just made human beings unhappy. It's a bad business, and what is crooked can't be made straight. There's nothing to do about that.
That's right.
You can't fix that, or at least there's a way to sort of address the situation, but you can't fix what's crooked.
Yeah, what is what is. Like you can't try as you might to change things. Sometimes when I read my students' papers and they don't get to the point for like 3 paragraphs, I'm going to just give them this, because literally the second verse is meaningless, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless.
And it gets right to some of the contradictions. So, like, at first, wisdom is vexation, at least in my translation, right before the second chapter. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and those who increase knowledge increase sorrow. Right. And this doesn't, there are going to be passages that go against that.
I mean, even in the beginning when he says, I applied my mind to study and explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens, the very authority that he has to be telling us is that this comes from great wisdom, right? So it is his wisdom that has given these truths. And a few verses later, he's like, by the way, if this is something you want, you should know. In my translation, it says, for with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief.
Yeah, the more grief, the more you know just how inexplicable everything is, and how unjust everything is, and how little you know. You start to realize how limited your perspective is, and how much you don't understand about, including God and everything.
Right. So we have contradiction one. Well, maybe not contradiction, but at least unexpected sort of wisdom. Wisdom is probably a bad thing for you. And then,
except that it's not worse than being foolish, because he says later that being foolish it's better to be wise than to be foolish.
Right.
So
I'm right,
it's
just
like,
jotting
it's not
stuff
like
down.
there's no
It's right along with you.
Be unhappy. Yeah.
It's not like if you're not wise then you're fine. Like being foolish has its own problems. Right. Being wise has
This is not an ignorance is bliss claim. It's a particular kind of suffering you're going to experience when you're wise.
There's this great thing, and this is all in the first chapter, of cycles. Like that, there's just nothing getting done. There's just the same cycles repeating itself over and over. A generation comes, a generation goes, or a generation goes, a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun goes up and down. There's people discover things, but there's nobody ever discovers anything new. It's all been said before, and it'll all be forgotten, and then it'll be discovered again, and then it'll be forgotten again.
Profound
and
stuff.
Just this we think we're making progress, but we're not.
Right.
And then there'll be generations that go through that same thing. And that seems deeply true to me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Everything is a remix.
Yeah, it really is. There's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a source of meaninglessness, right? Maybe Nagel would say that this is a mistaken source of meaninglessness. Like, if it didn't go in a cycle, would it be better?
Right.
But I think this is kind of a robust, right? Like, yeah, it might be. Like, if I actually came up with anything new, maybe it would be worth it. This is when we go back. So he's in the first person, and he says, "Let me tell you about my journey to try to find like what is good in life. Like, let me tell you, like, I've just told you life is meaningless. Let me tell you how I arrived at this.
Yes.
I started with the most basic. He says, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter is madness, and what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine, also wonderful, and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives." This always struck with me, this talk of like just in these few days of your lives, because as a young man, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, we live so long. But as an old person, you're like, yeah.
He tried the pleasure life.
Right.
That didn't pan out. It's all meaningless.
And he goes into quite detail as to what the pleasures were that he tried. It reminds me of a lot of sort of Christian come to Jesus sermons where people will bear testimony to their lives, and they would talk for like 45 minutes, an hour about like how they were fucking everybody and doing all these drugs and like go into great detail, and at the very end they're like, and I found Jesus, and don't you want to find Jesus too? And I'd be like, no, I want to try that other shit you were talking about.
And this is a recurring religious thing, right? Buddha tried this. Like, this is, you try a life of pleasure, and you have to go through that to realize that doesn't work.
Right.
But what's interesting about this is nothing really seems to work.
Yeah, and he tried a lot. Built houses, planted vineyards, made gardens. Right, this is a king, so he has all the resources in the world. Made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees, which you would think would give meaning to your life. Bought male and female slaves and had other slaves born in my house. Owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. It's almost like a rapper bragging about like all the cars he has.
Yeah.
I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. Tamler, in your translation, verse 8 of chapter 2, where he says, I acquired male and female singers. Mine has a translation that apparently is a matter of interpretation. He says, and a harem as well.
I got singers and delights of the flesh and many concubines.
Oh,
yeah, that's kind of the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had spent doing it, and again, all was vanity or meaningless and a chasing after the wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun.
Right.
I think that under the sun is interesting in what allows people to sort of claim that this is prefiguring Christianity. There's nothing good on this earth,
right.
But in the world to come, there is.
Maybe, yeah.
But I actually find that not a plausible reading of this text, but I can see why. In fact, like certain students, the religiously inclined students, have said that that's how it was taught, that this is taught that the earth and our life is not the thing that's going to solve our problems. It's the next world.
It seems a stretch to me.
I mean, it's flatly denied, actually, in a certain verse where he says, like,
yeah, exactly.
Where it says to enjoy the pleasures that you have on this earth, because where we're going, there's nothing like that.
Left. Yeah.
There's nothing, essentially.
Yeah. So I take under the sun to be a poetic way
chair
of saying anywhere.
Stuck here. Okay.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So there's like just even in the line that you read, like I tried wine and I tried laughter and that was all bad. But then later in the text, you know, drink and be merry and enjoy your wine and enjoy your food,
exactly.
and that's what's good about life. So How do you what do you make just of that little contradiction? We can talk about some of them, but just of that one.
Both with toil and with pleasure, it's just that contradiction. So I made of it. I mean, here's maybe why it didn't seem like a contradiction to me. It feels as if the approach to why you're doing these things really matters. If you're chasing tail or whatever,
chasing strange,
because you want to feel meaning in life, then you're going to be disappointed. But given that there is no meaning, right? If you know that, if you already realize that there's no meaning to your work or to this seeking of pleasure, then you might as well take delight in the things that you're doing.
Right. Don't do it like he went into doing it. Like, this is the life that's going to give me meaning, because then it'll be chasing the wind, shepherding the wind. It will be in vain. Like, that's actually that's where vanity is.
That's right.
Like, it is in vain that you would do that. But to do it, I think that's a great actually way of looking at it, is that this idea of recognizing what's just kind of intrinsically good about those things. A warm body that you sleep next to, the being with friends, and the kind of just inherent sleeping well when you do a good hard day's work, and those things are just in and of themselves good, but don't expect it to bring any kind of ultimate purpose or meaning to your life, because that's chasing the wind.
That's right. That's why when I do cocaine, I do it expressly realizing there's no meaning in life, not as a way to try to sort of fill. It's a very, very different experience.
It is. I think if you do it like that, you don't get coke dick.
Oh God!
So you love these guys? They're great.
Yeah, I think that's right, and it's contradictory only on the face.
Maybe some other contradictions, like there's definitely a lot of passages that suggest that there's no justice.
That's, I think, one of the key themes, and one of the things that made this resonate with me the most, like as a young person who's interested in morality and in ethics, to have this, hey, the race isn't to the swift. There is the just and the unjust get the same fate. So, right.
Profound stuff.
The wise, like the fool, will not long be remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. Just remember,
that is good.
Everybody dies. There's no just distribution of gifts.
The great equalizer.
But what I kind of like, the kind of comforting part of that is, I think implicit in people who complain about injustice is that the unjust people are getting a better deal. And what he's saying is, no, the unjust people, the fools, the corrupt people, the oppressors, they're all they're not having fun either. Nobody's having fun.
Right. Like Donald Trump's not having fun either.
Just than unjust.
Well, we know
it's
that.
All
That's obvious.
The wind. Right. It's all meaningless. It's all absurd. Right. And so you don't have to worry about them sort of getting an advantage through their injustice. Because that's
Donald Trump and all his porn stars and his skyscrapers and his president.
The work part is another sort of thing that gets.
Or if you want to use another person like Jeff Bezos,
you're doing work because you think
$180 billion.
That's why saying there's nothing new under the sun is so. It's so undermining, because you think you're working hard to leave a legacy, to make a contribution. You're working your ass off, but you get nothing from it. So again, I think he's saying just take pleasure in what you do. This is the gift of God, but I don't think that this is praising God too much. I think just like the book of Job, God in the book of Job is sort of the person who brings good and evil to the world. And when he appears to try to answer Job's questions, he just says, shut the fuck up. I have made this world. Who are you to question me? And I get that same sense here when he says, nothing, just whatever God made, nothing can be added, nothing can be taken from it. It's less isn't God wonderful than it is, look, man, he's the guy who set up the rules. Like, there's nothing that you could do that's going to change anything. So you might as well just take delight in that.
It's the freaking Big Bang, kind of. It's like,
exactly, right.
But so here's the thing that I'm that I question, because on the same page in my translation, so earlier in chapter 2, what do mortals get from all the toil and strain with which they toil under the sun? For all their days are full of pain, and their work is a vexation. Even at night, their minds do not rest. This is also vanity. So, like, that seems to contradict this idea that it is God's gift that all should eat and drink and take pleasure in their toil. Like, unless it's like what you say, that there's something that they're doing it wrong or something.
I think so.
It wrong.
I think that the toil and anxious striving is this view that you're working to make anything permanent, or to leave a mark, or to find meaning. When you work like that, you're going to have an anxious mind. You're going to not be able to sleep at night. Your work is going to bring you grief and bring you pain.
And like, you're going to be dissatisfied.
Yeah. And so again, it is, I always read this as a kind of, well, not always, because I read this before Sisyphus, but as a sort of Sisyphean take on it. Look, you're going to work. That work is meaningless. You might as well embrace it and enjoy it. You can find, I think, the pleasure that you can find in doing work is one that the one that will come once you realize that it's not what you thought it was. You know?
Yeah. I can see that reading. I think there's a lot for it. I also think this could also be, like, sometimes toil, no matter how you approach it, really does suck.
Yeah.
And that's just life. Like, sometimes your work is meaningless and it's not intrinsically enjoyable.
Right.
The real evil is when there is work that has the potential to be fulfilling, and it's not fulfilling because you're approaching it wrong. So I do think that there is this element of, no, like, sometimes this is just, it's just bad. We're given a bad life. The dice roll, and we're losers, you know, in the lottery of our toil and effort. But the real evil is when people have possessions or honors or work that they could enjoy, but they don't because they're keep chasing after something else.
Yeah, perhaps. It's funny because both of us, you to a lesser extent, are trying to resolve the contradiction in some way. Yeah. And I was just thinking to myself, like, because it's so foreign to me to be able to, like, just accept the contradiction, you know? Because I don't know, there must be something there. It's two different kinds of work, or two different approaches to work, or right. Maybe in some sense, it's borders on incoherent to me. That's why I can't accept it. But in some sense, he's saying, like, but work sucks, but you should work. Like, take pleasure in work. Yeah,
that's right. Like, I think these are two sides of us sometimes that he is getting at, and maybe the author has no wish to reconcile them because they're not totally reconcilable. They are two aspects of life,
right?
And and I had that same thought. Like, we're trying to resolve these contradictions, but maybe there's certainly one way of thinking is that's not what we're meant to do here.
Right.
So let me ask you, I have a question for you as a religious person, and especially Christian. I was struck by this when I read it. I said in my heart with regard to human beings that God is testing them to show that they are but animals. For the fate of humans and the fate of animals is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and humans have no advantages over the animals, for all is vanity.
Wow.
And there's another passage that sort of repeats that idea. We're all just like animals, essentially. Yeah. Like, there's no... That if there's one thing I associate with religion, and maybe in particular Christianity, it's no, human beings are special.
Yeah.
They're not like animals.
Yeah. This is why I feel like this was after having read The Denial of Death, for instance, where much of the theme is that we're simply animals who know that we're going to die. Yeah. Like, and that's what brings us all this anxiety. Reading this is like, oh yeah, he was saying this, whatever, thousands of years ago.
But how did, like, your religious
Yeah,
That's a great book, by the way. You mentioned Denial, Death, Ernest Becker.
So two things
I've read
might not be
that
satisfying to you. One
3
is
times. I
it
read
was
it when I
rarely
was
talked
20.
about, right? Until it was forced to talk about. So I remember reading these, sort of as I was beginning to doubt things, and finding some comfort that, like, finally somebody fucking has the balls to say, like, we don't know. How do you know if the human spirit rises upward and if the spirit of the animal goes downward? Like, that is our lot on earth, to not know for sure, right? Even if you say you have faith in an afterlife, there is a deep, deep truth to saying, who knows? The other thing is, in my particular religion,
Dusk, right? It's
the
getting
mental
darker.
gymnastics that was done to get
When I
out of
started
this
this
was
video.
to say, Seventh-day Adventists don't believe in
I'm going to do a
separate
two-parter
soul from
yeah.
the body. So they, unlike most Christians, don't believe that your spirit goes up to heaven when you die. They believe in bodily sort of, you really are ashes to ashes and dust to dust, and it's not until the second coming that God reconstitutes your body magically and then takes you to heaven. And so they said, like, oh, this was an insight even back then, before, that we actually just go down into the ground. But then Jesus comes along in the second half of the Bible for us and, like, saves us from this.
Yeah, I think this sits better with Jewish tradition in that it's just not all about the afterlife to anywhere near the extent that it is for Christians, and especially maybe Catholics.
My Jewish doctor talked about this.
And the new kind of Christianity, which really is very heaven and hell focused.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, in the part right before this theme, we touched on it, this theme where he says, verse 16 of chapter 3, and I saw something else under the sun. In the place of judgment, wickedness was there. In the place of justice, wickedness was there. I said to myself, God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked, for there will be a time for every activity, a time to judge every deed. So a lot of this is lamenting the injustice of the world, right? Like, pointing out how unfair everything is. Some of it seems to be just a meditation on it, saying, like, don't, like, just, this is how this world is. It's just not, it's unjust. This is one of the spots where it seems like the author really has some belief that God is going to take care of this, right? So unlike the other part where I sort of waved it off as like no, he's not really.
Tacked on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one seems like he has some belief that God as a judge will actually bring, but then he goes on to say, but when you die, who knows? So, like, where
we don't know if we go up or down or wherever.
Yeah.
But this is why I was saying, I forget where, maybe on Twitter with somebody who tweeted at us about this, that I think you could make an argument that the last few verses aren't tacked on, just fear God, follow his commandments, because there are sprinkled throughout the text, there's a few other things, but fear God, like, just God will judge you, God will judge all your deeds. Few people in my class, when I just taught this in intro class, said how they were taught about it. They were not allowed to read it until they reached a certain age.
Wow.
That's interesting.
And I think this sounds reasonable, actually. You need a certain level of maturity to really appreciate what the message is. That's what they said.
Let me turn on this light.
Would you ever forbid your kid to read something like this?
No.
Yeah.
No, but I showed my daughter, Chinatown.
Yeah, no. You know what I think that because I was saying, like, this sounds like it's tacked on. What I realize is that it's not so much that there is a person who comes on and says they have faith in God and you should, like, it's the real concrete way in which they say it, where it's like there's been no mention of God's commandments up until that point.
Yeah,
it seems like the mind of a smaller person who's like, by the way, follow God. So it lacks the poetry, it lacks the sort of it relies on almost like a karma. If you follow commandments, everything will go well, when we've just been told how nothing goes well,
But that's the thing. There's so many of these little contradictions. But you're right that the tone of the last verses, which we'll talk about, is very different. We should talk about what we're talking about here. Yeah.
You mean the last bit? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so in chapter 12, natural place for it to end would be verse 8. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher, all is vanity. It would give this really nice, well-rounded, that's how it starts, and that's how it ends, right? Like, and then it goes, besides being wise, the teacher also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs. And then it goes on at the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for that is the whole duty of everyone. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. It's like, whoa, what?
Right. And my translation says something about like the conclusion of the matter. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Now that all has been heard, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. And it's like, well, it may or may not be true, but it definitely isn't summing up what has been said.
Yeah. Actually, in that case, my translation, I think, is better at the end of the matter.
Right.
It could just be that this is the new, like, it has to end on one contradiction. It's not resolving. So here's where it happens to be ending.
Right. I wanted to say, to go back to that part in Ecclesiastes 7 when he's talking about wisdom being good, a lot of the things that he's saying about wisdom are sort of pragmatic goods. So, like, it's the case that if you have wisdom, so he says, wisdom like an inheritance is a good thing. It benefits those who see the sun. This is verse 11. Wisdom is a shelter, as money is a shelter. But the advantage of knowledge is this: wisdom preserves those who have it. And so I think he's saying many times, like, hey, man, it's all things being equal. Like, if you have wisdom, you're going to do better. You're going to be able to stack your chips, live a life that is an easier life. And I still think it holds that he says, but like, if that's what you think is going to bring you happiness, then you're still wrong, right?
Yes.
There's a great in this chapter, one of the great sort of, maybe it sounds almost Hellenistic. He says, verse 15, in this meaningless life of mine, I've seen both of these, the righteous perishing in their righteousness and the wicked living long in their wickedness. Do not be over righteous, neither be over wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be over wicked and do not be a fool. Why die before your time? It's good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. Whoever fears God will avoid all extremes. So that's all of a sudden a weird kind of like a balance argument where he's like, it's like saying the good die young, so don't be too good. You don't want to do that. Like,
right?
Yeah.
It's the only time I found in the book that he's making some sort of appeal to like this
middle way,
this middle way, right?
Yeah. Chapter 8 on this topic. Those sinners do evil 100 times and prolong their lives, yet I know it will be well with those who fear God, because they stand in fear before him, but will not be well with the wicked. Neither will they prolong their days like a shadow, because they do not stand in fear before God. So this is, again, a little bit like that last part where it's like, you got to fear God, you got to and being a sinner, you're going to get fucked in the afterlife. But then in chapter 9, all this I laid to heart, examining how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hands of God. Whether it is love or hate, one does not know. Everything that confronts them is vanity or meaningless, since the same fate comes to all, to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, to the evil and to the clean and the unclean, to those who sacrifice and those who do not sacrifice. As are the good, so are the sinners. Those who swear are like those who shun an oath. There is an evil under the sun, that the same fate comes to everyone. Now, I mean, whoa, like, how does that not completely contradict both the end and what just came before it in the previous verse? But, like, that, like, I'm amazed that that's in there. Right?
I know. It's great. And, like, one of my favorite parts in that theme in the same, that was verse 1. Go down to verse 11. I've seen something else under the sun. this was always, I had this memorized. I used to quote this all the time. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. Yeah. That's just truth. That's just true.
Yeah.
You know, I think that it shook me from much of the dogma that, whether explicitly or implicitly taught, that if you follow God, things will go well. And a lot of people had to learn that lesson by having something shitty happen to them.
Exactly.
And I think that I learned it this way. I like to think that I did, because
that's so profound.
You know, that I don't have to be touched by evil in order to see
this here.
That there's no justice.
Yeah. So
let me pause this here. Oh, okay. I'm 53 minutes in. Plus, I have my intro and outro. You can't go more than an hour on iMovie, so I could extend it out. There, let's see, 18 minutes left. But then I wouldn't be able to send it to iMovie. So let me do this. I'll make this a two-parter. I'll stop it here on part 2, Ecclesiastes 2. I'll start up with the remaining 18 minutes and 34 seconds, and then you'll hear what I have to say about it. So I hope you're enjoying this. This was one of the best podcasts. Just a great sort of analysis of the great Ecclesiastes, one of the wisdom books. Okay, people. Good friends, good books, and a sleepy conscience. Peace, love, and understanding here on Tabor Talk.